Dave Zumpano is a master at making things look simple. Now, you as a listener have probably met people in your life. It could be an artist, it could be someone in the business world, or it could be a tradesperson. And they take something that looks extremely complex and they make it look effortless and simple. Well, the reason why they can do that is because of all of the practice, the hard work, the things that they've done, and because of the systems and processes that they follow. This episode, we're chatting with an absolute master. Dave has built several businesses over a 3+ decade period. And if you count his childhood growing up around entrepreneurs and business owners, we'll stack another 2 decades on there. So he has all of this experience of building and growing large companies, acquiring companies, and then collaborating, all in making it look very simple. There are so many nuggets of wisdom inside this episode. So if you, as a business owner, depending on where you are in your career, if you're trying to break that threshold of your first business and trying to cross that $100,000 a year mark, this is it. If you've already been in business for a while and you're crossing that $1 million mark, this is an episode to hear about those systems and processes and other pieces. And if you're looking for something even bigger, meaning you want to grow and acquire another company, or you want your organization to grow and you want to go from 7 figures or 8 figures over to 9 figures, this is it. Dave has so much wisdom, and I look forward to you enjoying this experience with me.
All right, so I'm Dave Zumpano. I'm an entrepreneurial attorney that still practices law and helps others practice law better. That's what gets me up in the morning and lets me sleep well at night.
Hey, Dave, welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. I'm great to be here. I'm so happy to be here. Anytime spending time with you, Spencer, is well worth it.
Well, thanks, Dave. You know, there's one thing that I do whenever I interview any guest, be it a friend, a new friend, someone that we're interviewing, is I do my homework. And I do that because I want to know who I'm talking with, and everyone has something that they've mastered that they're unique at. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about systems, and we're going to be talking about organizations and things that you've done. But the root of this conversation I pulled from another one of the podcast episodes you were on. And it's a quote you said. You said, "Protecting the personal financial freedom of families is one of the goals that you guys have." It's a motto, but there's a word in there, which is freedom.
You know,
why is that?
One of the things I've had the privilege, be starting my 30th year of practice in a few months, and the people. One of the things that's always made me succeed in practice is listening. My dad always said, "Dave, the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you speak." And what I realized in all these years of listening to clients and their needs, what they want is they want what they want, right? They want to just be able to do what they want to do. They want to be able to give what they have to whom they want, when they want, the way that they want, without unnecessary cost or delay or government interference. And so the concept of freedom is, how do you remain free? And how you remain free, meaning freedom of choice, freedom of decision-making, freedom of results, freedom of doing what you want with what you have and what you've earned. To me, that's a real powerful word, because the law has defaults, right? Most people say, "Well, I don't have planning done." Yes, you do. The government has planning for you if you don't do your own. And that's not freedom. That's doing it their way. So for me, it's about making sure people get to do things the way they want to have it done within the confines of the system that we have to do it. And our system is very generous. It allows us to maintain our freedoms, especially in times of great need, right? Catastrophe, crisis, health crisis, and things in that nature, even after passing. And that's really what it's about, making sure that freedom stays with the individuals and the people that they trust and care about.
Hey, that's really well said. Let's kind of dive into that a little bit, because the government and the existing systems in place their standard protocols,
Yeah.
and we'll call that a baseline of freedom.
Ground zero. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you're doing as you've innovated inside of the tech world in different industries, especially right now in legal tech, is that you're taking that baseline of freedom and you're almost opposing, you're overcoming some of the obstacles that happen in that world. And most business owners don't realize this until they're already in, meaning, yes,
Yeah.
you have a fight to get new customers and to break in the marketplace, but you're actually fighting the dinosaurs in your industry that say, no, like you got to come to our firm, and you're bringing everything online. So talk about that.
Yeah, it's funny. You talked about everyone has a unique skill or whatever. One of the things that mine has been is I'm a simplifier. I take very complex things and simplify them down. One of the distinctions you and I were talking a minute ago before we went live, and we're talking about how people, lawyers, what's our role? How do we deliver value? Right? In the end, people want value. So to create value, you have to simplify the path. Life has gotten really, really complicated, busy, and full. So much information. So a recent study I just read said that it used to be about 14 seconds people had of bandwidth. Now it's down to about 6 seconds of bandwidth they have. And so we have to simplify down. And my inspiration was The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. But most people read that book. I lived that book from the day I read it, and I started creating systems and process. So that's really what it's really all about. It's creating a simpler path to be relevant to the people and to be able to help them because they want help. But there's so much information overload that they can't seek it. And a lot of times when they do seek it, what they're seduced by are the best marketers, right? Because great marketers are emotionally driven. But we've all met great marketers who are not really good, practitioners. And so it's really about making sure that the average everyday folk has access to the best legal or other information in the easiest way.
Let's walk through that. So this isn't something that a methodology that you started practicing last week. You've been in this for a long time. But
Yeah.
what it takes that journey, that process of doing it, the tenured time to apply it to this new venture. So as you understood the world technically, how did you realize what was most important to simplify?
Well, here's what happened. I'll be simple. I'll make it real simple. LegalZoom came out, right? So when LegalZoom came out, what did it do? It went straight to the consumer. And are you ready? It's not a lawyer. In fact, that's how they sustain themselves. They're not a law firm. They're a self-help service. And when I looked at that, I'm saying, wait a minute. There are so many people flocking to, now there's 100 of those sites, non-lawyer sites to get what are traditionally legal services. And I'm saying, okay, I'll admit they're better than nothing. But what is freedom? How do people sustain it and make it work? How can they ensure that in that moment when mom has a stroke, in that moment when something's happened and there's a healthcare decision to be made or a legal decision to be made, that the decision being made is that of the individual and not of the individual who granted the authority, not the individual who received the authority. Most documents today are all authority, but no instructions. So they give full authority. Yeah, my son could do this, but you don't tell your son what to do. Well, he'll know what to do. Well, you know what that does to family relationships? It destroys them because everybody's got different ideas of what mom and dad wanted. So at the end of the day, while those self-help services are baseline, they destroy and create damage and therefore reduce freedom. And so what we saw was, okay, how do we take on these big elephants, whether they're non-legal or whether they're the big law firms themselves? And I, through a program called Strategic Coach in Toronto, they're in the US and 6 and 7 other countries, they coach entrepreneurs. I met another entrepreneur from the UK who's a technology guy. And I met him at lunch. I said, I need a tech guy. And he said, well, what is your vision? I said, we have to be able to let lawyers break down these barriers they have. It's so difficult to get to a lawyer's office. You got to call them, and then they got these long schedules, and you're lucky if they call you back. And, and people, not in today's society, man, they don't put up with that stuff. So we had to make a platform that says to lawyers, hey, listen, lawyers, you could be nimble, you can be quick, you could be a cheetah, and most importantly, you could be an elephant. You can really pound big, powerful information, but you got to start simple and small. And that's what the digital platform did. So my partner, Guy Riemann in the UK, he built a technology company that has now become what we know as Disney Plus. And so he's pretty versed in this. And he saw my experience 30 years in the legal industry, especially particularly in the estate planning. He said, I think I can help you build this. The interesting thing is we met once over lunch in the fall of 19. We've never met since because of COVID in person. We had a few phone calls, and by February of 20, we built this company and started programming, and then COVID happened. Now, what's the significance of that? Pre-COVID, my companies were on Zoom in 2017, 18, 19. We could not get clients to come meet with us on Zoom. We couldn't get financial professionals we work with to come meet with us on Zoom. And then we had the blessings of the gods, right? Someone say, oh my God, you're saying this is a blessing? No, the pandemic has been horrible. It's shut down the world, but it's opened up our futures. And how it's opened up our futures is it's enabled people to break down those barriers and to open up to do this virtual conversation. And that's what we saw. And timing was everything. And so we continued to build that platform based on that concept, simplifying and opening up different ways for people to communicate more simply with their local lawyer.
Oh, that's wonderful. You packed a lot of things in there because you mentioned you understood what your strengths were. You understood the system strengths, but you had to find someone on the tech side, but not just any person. I mean, you could have gone through and hired a CTO, or you could have, hired it out to a dev shop or something like that. But you actually wanted someone that could drive and provide strategy. And then once that happened, you matched his strategy and then your expertise. I think that's where the real magic is happening nowadays. It used to be where, go back to the gold mine days, you got lucky, you found a claim and you went in. But now it's, taking someone that's, good or excellent at one thing and good at excellent at something else that doesn't look connected, and then having the marriage between the two. So talk about that.
Well, somebody once told me, if you put your two number one fingers up and you put them next to each other, what's 1 + 1? And the typical answer is 2. But if you really look, it's 11 if you do it right. Right. And so when you take two people and each one of them are working within their unique skills, one of our core values at Lawyers with Purpose is curious, right? We're really curious to understand what things we didn't even know to know. And if you really have a curious mind, you never think you know everything. In fact, you every day wake up thinking and wondering all the stuff you don't know. So every person you interact with, you ask lots of questions. You want to know what it is that they do. And when I met Guy, it was a quick conversation and I got an insight. But here's the other side of the story most people don't realize. Guy was my third, right? I tried 2 other times with 2 other technology people and it didn't work. And Guy was going to be my last. It was, all right, he says he can do it. He's got some good history behind him. He's built a big company that is now, even a ginormous company. Let's see what can happen. So we set up a 30-minute phone call to discover each other. And that 30-minute phone call led to another hour phone call, another hour phone call. And within 3 months, we had a business model. We had our own investment lined up, and we began developing the product. And that's what it is. Like you said, too many times, whatever we are, whether we're lawyers or anything else, we try to rely on our own skill and knowledge. The greatest thing we can do is rely on the skill and knowledge that we have that is unique, that is really, and I say it's unique, it comes easy to us, right? People say, oh my gosh, you're so good at that. You say, oh no, that's nothing. When you hear yourself saying that, that's what you're really good at. And that's, if you just focus on that and surround yourself with other people that are really good at the things that when you put it with your thing, make it exponential, that's how you get to where you're going a lot quicker and a lot smoother.
Yeah, absolutely. To use some of the language from Strategic Coach, the organization you mentioned, they have a phrase that's often used, which is who, not how.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that speaks to us. That sings to us because we both know that it's not going to be something that we necessarily do that's going to create the gigantic change of it all. We're going to have the right people on board. And you've mentioned earlier the right systems in place. And
Yeah.
when you can't get that marriage, then you see a lot of business owners frustrated because they're never able to break free.
You reference Who Not How. If anyone has not read the book by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, I recommend they get it, Who Not How. What it really focuses on is people working with strategic coach calls in their unique ability. My father always said, we've got our God-given talents, right? So it's really cool. And I have a simple way of assessing whether you have a who. It's 3 simple words. Is it occurring? Is it occurring? So what do you want? I want marketing. I want lots of leads. Well, are you getting them? No. Well, then they're not a who, right? Who's no, and they do it intuitively and naturally. Hey, I want to make profit. Well, if you're running your law firm and you're not profitable, you're not the who. You got to bring the who in to knows how to run and manage a firm to make it profitable. And they'll help you find out your highest and best use to the law firm or whatever your business is. Who is very simple. Is it occurring? If it's occurring, you have a who. Now, don't be harsh. I mean, sometimes there's a process to get there. As long as you're progressing toward it, yes. But if you find yourself next, Groundhog's Day or hamster wheel, those are some analogies people can relate to. It's not occurring. It's time to find another who.
Did you know that before you learned the concept and the principle of who, not how, because you were focused on systems, or was that another light bulb moment for you?
For me, the who, not how conversation was not a light bulb as much as a confirmation.
Okay.
Dan has done this for a number of years, but I've been running businesses for now 30. And I really started in a family business when I was 5. So if you think about it, I've been in this over 50 years, this thing called entrepreneurship. And what I realized was in business, I always just pay attention to things that are hard and things that are easy, because that's another litmus test. When things are easy, it's because you know how to do it and it's natural and you're a who in that area. So I think what Dan has done, Dan has taken this concept and given us a way to speak about it simply, right? It's all about language. How can we communicate in a simpler way? So I think the who, not how concept really is a big anchor to all of us to help us stay true to core business principles, which is right seat, right boss. Everybody says it, they say it a different way, right? Right seat, right boss. That's who, not how. All these different things, whether it's Jim Collins, Dan Sullivan, all them, they all come back to these fundamental principles that people are really good at stuff. And they need to stay in those areas they're really good at and surround themselves with the people that are really good at the other parts they need to succeed in whatever they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. With the decades of experience that you have, incredible track record, you really have. And it's because you swim in that lane and it's very predictable. Like you're putting those systems in, you're making it more simple, you're getting the right people in place. Let's take that experience and then let's talk about the frustration that's happening in the professional services world. And, we can talk about law firms because I know we have listeners on this podcast that own professional service companies. And, some of them break free by luck, some break free by strategy. But I would love to give some insight so that they can take and use some of that decade of wisdom and maybe we can impart a couple of things. I know maybe systems, something of that nature.
So systems, so 2 different things. One is process and one is systems, right? So process is the steps you take to get from point A to point B. What do you do first, second, third, fourth, fifth? So that's where you start. That's where I've always started. What's the process? What comes first, second, third? The system then becomes, how do you get from step 1 to step 2? What is the data you collect? What is the affirmations along the way to know which part of the second step they go to? So process, step 1, 2, 3, 4. System is how do we get from step to step? So I'll be honest with you. It's something that I've done over the years. And I didn't know I knew how to do it, but once, now it's 23 years ago, I started doing it and it just naturally kept flowing. So here's what I say. You ready? build it, buy it, or rent it. Build it, buy it, or rent it. So in the early days, I didn't know how to do it. So I went and rented a guy. I went and hired a consultant who knew how to build systems. Well, after I rented him for a while, we worked so well together, I bought him and he became a core employee in my company. And we focused wholeheartedly on building, developing systems in my law firm. So I first rented him, then I bought him. After he departed, then I had to go buy another. But now I've created a whole system on how to build systems, right? So that's probably the piece of advice I would give is you don't have to swallow the whole elephant. Start at the toes and work your way up. And start, I mean, a good consultant, even if you're paying a little bit of a premium, is less money than trying to build it or buy it because it's in a short period of time. And the information, think about college. You go to college, you learn, you take these online courses, a one-day training program. Why do we do those? Because we want to get the knowledge imparted from others that they've learned. Like you said, I've been doing this 30 years. Well, what can I impart in you in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 5 hours? Buy it, rent it, or build it. And that's kind of, I think, a strategy to help you get there in the safest way.
You know, I haven't heard someone articulate it that way, but as you were saying that, I looked through the businesses that I've owned and the businesses I own, and I'm like, that's a good way of putting it, because that's the same thing I've always done.
Yeah.
I will admit, when you mentioned build it, buy it, rent it, when you mentioned the buy it, my mind is like buying businesses, because I've bought businesses. And I will say that when you're buying a business, a huge factor of doing that is, what do the systems and processes look like?
Exactly.
Because the last thing we ever want to do is buy another job. Yeah, we can buy revenue,
Right.
but we don't want to buy jobs at that point.
What you're buying is skills, right? So when I say buy it, I mean buy a skill set. If you don't have it, buy the skill set, which is not a company, it's an employee, right? That's an investment in an employee. Now, why do people buy companies? Well, because they've already done all the grunt work of building the systems and processes, and those systems and processes applied to your database of prospects creates money, right? So you've got all these buyers, but you don't have a product, and you find a product that's ideal for your buyers. Go buy that company, because by virtue of having that product and you being able to distribute to your distribution channels, that's how you expand profit, right? So you could buy companies, you could buy talents. And when I say buy, I mean invest in is another way to say it. But yeah, I think the art is that balance of knowing. You know, you and I could talk about acquiring companies. I've done that many times when it was easier than building it, right? It's for those listening that maybe haven't been through that experience yet. Everybody thinks buying is, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to buy things. Being an entrepreneur is not buying things. Being an entrepreneur is understanding when to buy things and at what price and how it correlates into what you already have, right? First, do no harm is always the first thing I say to myself. This is a really good opportunity. It's really cool, but how does it fit what I always have? And one of the key things I've always done from my very first business, any business I open must somehow relate to the other business. For example, started a law firm. What was the next business I did? I bought commercial real estate that my law firm went into, right? So they support each other. Then what's the next thing? All right, create a national legal organization. Well, that's kind of not typical for people, but what happened was I built all these systems and processes for my local law firm. Other lawyers were saying, we want to know how you do that. Teach us, we want to know. So the next natural thing was teaching people what I do in my law firm every day. So now my law firm 30 years later is the laboratory that I'm constantly doing new innovations that I'm delivering to my national legal organization. And that's really what it's all about, is how does one support the other versus pulling or distracting you from the other?
I love it. That is so valuable. I would love for our listeners to be able to follow up from you, continue to learn from you. You've been on a lot of different podcasts, recently have put out a book, and then you've got your new platform coming out. So if you could quickly explain to listeners how they can learn more about you, and then how they could get in touch with you.
So I'll give you my email addresses first, and then I'll share what each of the things you can kind of explore around me. So my main email, which is at my law firm, is first initial David, so D Zumpano, Zumpano, at eplawcenter.com. That's E like Echo, P like Papa, lawcenter.com. And then D Zumpano at Guider, GUIDR.legal. Guider.legal is the technological platform that I created with Guy Riemann from the UK that I've referenced. And we just published a book. It's available on Amazon called The Digitization of Law, How to Transform Technology's Disruptions into Abounding Opportunities. And I encourage anyone in the legal field who wants to learn estate planning, elder law, or asset protection, or has that knowledge already and wants to be able to deliver it in new ways to the consumers. The Guider platform is the next iteration of the innovations that I've been fortunate to bring to the estate planning industry over the last 20 some odd years. Estate planning, elder law, asset protection, right? Medicaid. I'm known as the Medicaid founder of the Medicaid practice. So Medicaid practice systems and things of that nature. So anyone interested in any of those things, but more importantly, to learn. I always said it's not what you know, it's what you don't know. So if there's things out there that we can share that you didn't even know you didn't know, we'd love to be able to do that. And again, my national legal organization is Lawyers with Purpose. There's no A in there, it's Lawyers with Purpose. And it doesn't just mean purposeful, it means we do everything intentionally. We do it with purpose internally and with purpose to the outside world. So how do you do that? How do you run a business with purpose internally and externally? And that's my world if anyone's digging a little deeper into it.
I love it. That's wonderful. And we'll make sure to put those inside of the show notes for listeners so it's easier for them as well.
Great. I appreciate it.
For our listeners, one extra little call to action is this. When you hear someone on a podcast and they have years of experience and they make things sound very simple because they can articulate it, that's usually a result of them understanding it so clearly and articulating it in a way that can help you. And so I invite you, even if you're not in the legal profession or maybe in the estate planning world, to read and consume some information, to follow up with Dave and sit there and say, there's going to be principles. Maybe it's not the technical piece, but the principles are things that I can glean and I can use to help in my business to have it grow. So Dave, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
And I appreciate you having the platform, Spencer. If we can help one person progress forward one step, we've done our job.
Thank you so much.